Krishna. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, and welcome to today's session. How are you doing? I pray that all is well with you and your families at this time. So, as we are assessing ourselves and trying to understand the process of life to decide what's the best way to act in different situations, one of the things that we're learning is the process of assessment and withdrawal. How to assess the situation and how to know when to withdraw, how to know when to pull oneself back, and how to develop the courage to do that. That's a very empowering situation of balance. That in the process of balance, one has to learn how to assess, and also one has to learn how to withdraw. Because control means also withdrawal. One understands when to enforce and when to withdraw. And unless there's a balance of both situations, one's life is not going to move in the direction you want it. It will move in its own direction. And that's what's happening to many of us, that we're just moving through the process of life without the courage of assessment. We are assessing, but we don't have the courage to implement what we're assessing. So one of the vital factors which comes in today's lesson is how to develop the courage to withdraw. And the prime example that Krishna uses today is from the animal kingdom. So let's take a look at this. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse number 58. Yada samharate chayam kurmo inganiva sarvasaha indriyani indriyartebhyas tasya pragya pratishtita. Translation: one who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects as the tortoise draws its limbs within the shell is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. So Krishna is going on with his assessment and explanation of the Sthita Pragya. Arjuna has inquired about the Sthita Pragya, the one in divine consciousness. And he has asked Krishna, Sthita Pragya kabhasha sa samadhistasya keshava Sthita dhir kim prabhaseta kim aseta brajeta kim. Krishna, how does this person speak? What is his language? How does he sit? And how does he move? So in today's verse, Krishna is further elaborating on this point, on how he is situated, how he's able to assess the world and how he's able to withdraw. What is the seat? What is the level of himself that he's situated at, that he's able to understand and is also able to control himself with inner strength coming from the level of the soul? How is he able to do this? How is he able to withdraw? Just like the example Krishna has given of a tortoise.
Box turtles are great turtles. They're really interesting because their shell actually has a hinge on the bottom of it. And if you scare them, they'll suck themselves in. Whoop, maybe not. I think he's used to me now. Whoop, see? Now he's just a little puzzled about why this predator has been following him for all this time and hasn't eaten him yet, maybe.
This is really a remarkable. In the different traditions of the world, this is one of the animals that's regarded with wisdom because it has the ability to withdraw itself at the time of danger. So this is a very practical example in the animal kingdom of how one is able to withdraw himself, how one is able to pull back to develop a sense of control of the senses when one is in a difficult situation. Because we know that when one is angry or uncontrolled, one will give the best speech that he will later live to regret. So Krishna is giving a beautiful example from the animal kingdom. Let's try to assess this. He describes here in the purport, the test of a yogi, devotee or self-realized soul is that he is able to control the senses according to his plan. Yes. So you remember, everything is tested. Time is the thing that tests everything in life. It tests durability, it tests strength, it tests character, it tests every part of life. So if one is going to understand oneself, one also has to understand the system or the mechanism of time. And as one adopts a certain way in which one carries oneself, then that will be tested by time. How long can you carry that on? However, Prabhupada gives the comparison that for a devotee, he doesn't have this problem. Why? Because he's connected at the level of the soul, and therefore what is coming out, outward expression, is a lifestyle. Is a lifestyle connected on the spiritual platform. Once you developed it as a lifestyle, then you don't have to make it extracurricular. You don't have to change it when you have to and change it when you don't. You're just living connected to that spiritual platform. And because your mind, your heart, your soul is connected to the spiritual platform from that level, then what comes out outwardly is sthita pragya, one who is controlled, one who is balanced, one who has a certain demeanor of speech, one who has a certain inner composition, an inner composure that empowers him to naturally deal with the outer world without being disturbed inside, because he's understood certain mechanics. And that was the definition of the Dhira, one who understands matter, one who understands spirit, one who understands the soul, one who understands the super soul, and one who understands nature. So because he understands and is observed and studied all these 5 mechanisms, and he's connected himself at the spiritual level, therefore what's coming out outwardly is a very balanced, composed person. A person who is rooted from the spiritual platform at the level of the soul. So the primary reason why he's able to pass his test is because he's connected at the spiritual platform. He's understood the mechanics of how these things are working, and he depends on the grace of the Lord to carry him through the rest. So it's a super balance. It's a balance on the spiritual platform. The balance of both of these, grace and mercy from the spiritual level and execution at the material level, he's become sthita pragya, one who is completely composed no matter what is happening around him. Very empowering, isn't it? We'd all love to be there. Well, it can be our inherent right, provided that we go through the system of steps to reach that level of intensity. So he goes on. Most people, however, are servants of the senses and are thus directed by the dictation of the senses. So we see that the senses are connected to the mind, and the mind itself has 2 experiences. It has immediate experiences, which is coming through the senses right now, and it has remote experiences, which is coming from one's past lives. So as the new impulses are coming through the senses right now, it is triggering the old impulses from previous lives. And this constant agitation of millions of desires keeps one in a very agitated state, a very disturbed state of mind. So by the logic, if one is able to control the outward senses by giving it a sense of focus, by giving it a sense of purpose, then the mind sends out the message to the senses to only look for the spiritual things. Because if you look at something, there's so many levels of understanding of what that is. If one looks at anything, there's so many levels of understanding of what that is. If one looks at the sun, then one can see, oh, this is a sun. A scientist looks, he says, oh, this provides heat and light. A devotee looks, he says, oh, Krishna Surya Sama, Maya Hoy Antakar. Krishna is like the sun. And one can also remember Bhagavad Gita, Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavam Aham Avyayam, that the first student of Bhagavad Gita was the sun, Vivaswan. So one can look at the same object, but according to one's consciousness, one will understand differently. So therefore, if one is connected at the soul, then his senses start to look at things spiritually. Do you see the logic of that? that the senses are now tuning in to look for spiritual things, and whatever it sees, it's connecting it on the soul platform, not at the body platform. So at the soul platform, one sees the same object, but one remembers Krishna by that. One sees the sun, but one remembers Krishna. One sees water, one remembers Krishna. Rasoham apsakontiya prabhasmi sasasurya. That I am the taste in water. So just like that, all the elements of nature or whatever objects one sees becomes udipan, or something that stimulates the remembrance of Krishna. So why is that happening? Because his consciousness is connected at the level of the soul. And because that's happening, he's seeing the same object you're seeing, but he is seeing it in connection to Krishna, and you are seeing it as a material object. So the difference with that consciousness is that when he's seeing it, he's connecting it at the spiritual platform, which then makes it prasadam. And if we see it without the spiritual consciousness, then it becomes bhoga. And therefore, when the senses pull us to enjoy that, we become bound, just like we've been describing in the previous verses. That is the answer to the question as to how the yogi is situated. So you see, Prabhupada is connecting that to the Sthita Pragya verse. Sthita Pragya kabhashasa samadhistasya keshava sthita dhir. Kim Prabhaseta, how is he sthita dhir? How is he situated? So that answer was answered now in today's verse, that he withdraws his senses. He's learnt the art. He's learnt the devotional art of withdrawing his senses. If he looks at something and he sees that he can't connect it to Krishna, he pulls his senses back. And Krishna has described in previous verses that this is the highest level of detachment. As soon as you can't connect anything to Krishna, any object or any situation, withdraw. Pull it in, pull the senses in and withdraw from there. Because at the level that you are, you don't know how to connect everything. You can connect some things, that which are spiritual, that which has more spiritual inclination, it's easier to connect those to Krishna. But as you practice, you learn to connect the whole world to Krishna. And in that way, it's not only that God will be experienced in the temple or in the church or in the mosque as a holy place, but God will be experienced everywhere at every moment in your life. This is the Uttama Adhikari. This is the level of the pure devotee. So he goes on. The senses are compared to the venomous serpents. They want to act very loosely and without hesitation. Yes, so in India you've seen the famous snake charmer, right? Yes, and if you look at that and you're saying this is a cobra and it can strike this person at any time, but he's learned the art of how to charm. That's why it's called a snake charmer. He's learned how to charm the snake, and he knows the do's and the don'ts. He knows how far to go. He's reading the signs and body language of the snake. Therefore, he's not intimidated when the snake acts. Therefore, he's not intimidated by the snake. Why? Because he knows the rules. He knows how it works. Let's take a look at this video. So he goes on, the yogi or the devotee must be very strong to control the serpents like a snake charmer. He never allows them to act independently. Yes. So although it looks like the snake is dancing to the music, but actually it's waiting to strike the flute. But from our interpretation, it looks like it's dancing to the music. But the reality is a snake can't hear. A snake is deaf. So how is it dancing? It's not listening to the music. It's moving to the motion of the flute player. It's moving to the motion of the snake charmer. As he moves left and right, the snake also moves left and right, waiting for an opportunity to strike. But he knows, he studied it, and he knows what is the threshold. He knows how far to push the snake, and he knows where to go and where not to go. Therefore, he is able to create the illusion of actually making the snake dance. So let's read further. There are many injunctions in the revealed scriptures. Some of them are do nots and some of them are do's. So you remember we were discussing this in the Patanjali yoga system. The yams and the niyams, the rules of doing and the rules of not doing. So you have to know both in order to be balanced, in order to have control, you have to know both. Because if you only know what to do and you're practicing on what to do, how will you respond when a bad, negative or evil situation arises? Then you don't know how to react. So you have to study both. This is balance. This is true balance. So he goes on. Unless one is able to follow the do's and the do nots, restricting oneself from sense enjoyment, it is not possible to be firmly fixed in Krishna consciousness. So if you want to be fixed in the transcendental platform, on the level of devotional service, then you have to understand both. You have to attain that balance, that inner balance of knowing the center of gravity, of knowing how much to give and how much to take, how much to enforce and how much to withdraw. You have to know both. What we find with many of us is that we only study the do's and we feel that that is enough to help us all the way through. No, Prabhupada is saying also study the do nots. Also know what I have to be careful of. And if we don't take precaution on that side, then we can become a casualty. Because the more casual we are, we end up becoming so casual, we end up being a casualty. So we have to be careful. Study both the do's and the do nots. The best example set herein is the tortoise. The tortoise can at any moment wind up its senses and exhibit them again at any time for particular purpose. So this is the devotee. He assesses, he sees, can I use this in Krishna's service? Can I use this on the devotional platform? And if I can't, then it's one of the things that I have to avoid. And the scriptures tell us that everything in creation can be used in Krishna's service. The only one thing that cannot. And what is that? Envy. Envy is the only thing that cannot be used in the service of the Lord. Everything, including lust. Because without lust, there is no conception. Therefore, you use that activity to get spiritual children. So he goes on. Similarly, the senses of the Krishna conscious person are used only for some particular purpose in the service of the Lord and are withdrawn otherwise. So the person assesses, what can I use, what can't I use? If I can't use it, leave it one side, is one of those things that I haven't learned the art of how to connect that yet on the spiritual platform. So usually we start with devotional things and devotional activity, and those are much more easier to connect on the spiritual platform. But as we grow and we learn this as a lifestyle, then we'll learn to connect everything at the spiritual platform. So he concludes here, Arjuna is being taught here to use his senses for the service of the Lord instead for his own satisfaction. Keeping the senses always in the service of the Lord is the example set by the analogy of the tortoise, who keeps the senses within. So Arjuna is being taught here. That means that Krishna wants us to practice this. If it's taught, that means it needs to be practiced. So Krishna is teaching Arjuna here so that we can also learn that it's something we also have to develop as a life skill. This is one of those life skills that are absolutely important to reach the higher levels of balance and to experience the higher levels of life at the level of the soul.